Carly from Hoot Reading. I'm here today with David Kleeman, who is, if you haven't heard of him, a real celebrity in the field of children's media. David is currently the SVP of Global Trends at Dubit. He is was formerly the president at the American Center for Children and Media. I've gotten to know David at conferences throughout the years we've worked together. I don't think I've ever been to a conference where David Kleeman is not speaking at. So we're very lucky to have him here today. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us.
I think the usual term for that is overexposed, and celebrity is mostly, I've been around a really long time.
Well, whatever term you use, you really are a guru, and parents are thinking a lot about screens and digital media. So we're very grateful to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with the word screen time. I cannot tell you how often, as somebody in the field as well, parents ask me, how much screen time should my children be having? So I already know your thoughts on the word screen time, but I'd love for you to share them with everybody.
It's one of my least favorite terms, because you look at what screens bring to kids and to families these days. They are communication, they're socializing, they are exploration, they're entertainment. There are so many different things. And now with the COVID-19 lockdown, they're also how kids are getting their schooling. So it doesn't make sense to me to measure screen time with a stopwatch that to say, oh, you only get a certain amount of screen time. If Skyping with grandma is very different from digging into your favorite pastime, if you're into dinosaurs, studying up on dinosaurs, which is very different from watching something with your family, watching a competition program with your family, or a comedy with your family, which is very different from spending some time with your friends, especially if you can't see them physically. So I tend to reject the term screen time and ask parents instead to look at what it is their kids are doing and to try to think about why they're doing it.
That's a good point. So let's dig into this a little bit more. I totally agree with you. I also don't like the word screen time. As you know, I've kind of followed your lead on that. But that being said, we as parents do need to make decisions about our kids' media usage and their use of things that are on screens. So I'd love to unpack what you mean by, asking how can parents think about screens, and what resources are there for them to help, for them to make good decisions?
I'm a big fan, to start with, of there's an author named Lisa Guernsey, who is a journalist and wrote a book about kids and media that, oddly enough, in its second printing was titled Screen Time. Originally it was Into the Minds of Babes, and then they renamed it Screen Time for some reason. But she talks about the 3 C's: content, context, and the needs of the individual child. And it's a really good framework for parents to think about as well. Starting with context, why is my kid doing what they're doing right now with the screen? Where am I? What are we doing right now? Is it an appropriate time for screen use? If I'm sitting in the doctor's office and my child is anxious, the context of using a screen is very different from if we are sitting in the car on a long drive, or if we're sitting at home. So what choices is my child making right now? The content is critical. Is my child just sort of flipping through channels or services or platforms looking for anything just to kill time, or are they really digging into something that they're passionate about? We've found in Dubit's research, one of the things we've seen is parents have told us, a number of different parents have told us, I watch my kid playing Minecraft and I don't really understand what they're doing, but I let them keep doing it. I don't put time restrictions on it because I can see how engaged they are, and I can see how active they are in it. And I can see that they're really thinking through things. And then the individual child, that's a natural transition to the individual child. Kids, especially in that, once they hit around age 6, develop unique passions, unique interests. The idea of education from media starts to be less push. I'm going to bring up an educational app for my child that is going to tell them exactly what to do, and more pull. We see kids migrate away from apps and toward the web, where they can start to look for the things that really engage them. Or if they are using an app, it's a more open-ended one that encourages them to read, to play, to think, to really put their own stamp on something. It's more generative than it is dictated to them what they're going to be doing. The one thing I want to be clear about is while I reject the term screen time, I do think parents need to pay attention to how much time their kids are spending. It's not necessarily the first consideration, but at the point where if it becomes a problem, if it begins to interfere with other things in their lives, then again, context comes back into play. That are they not going out and playing with friends because they're connected to their screens? Are they uh, having trouble breaking away from it? And if that's the case, there's often a secondary issue that's going on. Are they not going out and playing with friends because they've been bullied, because they don't feel close to anyone? Soon we're going to have the concern of, is it safe for me to go out and play with my friends? And kids are going to have to get over that anxiety. So I don't want to minimize parental attention to what their kids are doing with screens, but I do want to encourage parents to look at the next level below just, oh, they're spending so much time.
Well, I think that's a great point. And you did just touch on something that's so interesting, which is right now we are in this school closure socialization period of COVID, which is such a unique time, and is certainly very unique time for parents and kids and their relationship with screens. You talked about the 3 C's from Lisa Guernsey. I use that approach as well. I think it's great. How specifically can a parent choose or make a good decision in terms of, I've taken the 3 C's, but I want to know if TikTok's okay, or I want to know if I should allow them on Roblox. Do you have advice for making those specific decisions?
On that, I'm a big fan of places like Common Sense Media.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've really unlocked the key to how to describe media to parents so that it's not prescriptive. It's, I know that a lot of the early kind of rating services said this is for ages 8 to 12, and a lot of parents of 8-year-olds said, not my 8-year-old, it's not. Or 12-year-olds saying my kid was completely bored by this. And Common Sense has really come up with the rubric for describing it to parents so they can make the decision based on their own family's values. Is the content what I'm looking for? Does it meet the values that my family holds? Is it of interest, something that's specifically of interest to my child? So I think rating services like that, Children's Technology Review, when you get beyond television and video and some of the more popular games, Children's Technology Review does a really good developmental assessment of what's going on out there. Read widely, and even more to the point, spend time with your kid doing it. Co-play, co-viewing is one of the best ways to get at what's important to your child and what's good for your child and what engages them in the way I was talking about before, where you see active engagement. Dubbit worked for a while with a company called Gigglebug, and Gigglebug's mission was to get parents and kids laughing together. And parents appreciate that. They will say yes to media if they can see, you know what, this makes my kid laugh. This makes my kid smile. It makes them happy. And that to me it may not be educational with a big E, but it sure is valuable. We're seeing more and more families spending time together with media, certainly during lockdown. But even before that, we were seeing families gather to watch things like the competition programs, the Dancing with the Stars, the singing programs, the cooking programs, Antiques Roadshow, and turn them into games for themselves. A lot of families are cooking together now, and they're playing sort of cooking games based on what they see on TV. So co-view, co-play, and turn to the experts when you have a question.
I love that. That's great advice. And I've really noticed in my household, in particular, since schools closed, that we are being brought together with the help of screens in a lot of cases. It's funny you brought up the competition shows. We started watching Survivor recently as a family, and I didn't even know we were ready for that. But it's very nice to be watching a show we all love and we're into. And like you said, suddenly we're doing Survivor challenges in the backyard. So it's something that's really fun for all of us.
my kids are well grown now. They're 32 and 28. But my older daughter, when she was about 6 years old, she was not a physical child. She didn't like to go out and run around and play. But she watched an old Nickelodeon show called Guts. It was athletic. A lot of the parents may remember Guts themselves, and it was athletic competitions. But it didn't reward the fastest or strongest. It rewarded the kid who had a strategy, or the one
Yeah.
who took their time to figure out what they were doing, or the one who was most persistent. And as a result, and girls won as often as boys, and little kids won as often as big kids. And my daughter loved that. And so when we'd go to the playground, she'd say, "Can we play Guts?" And what she meant by that was, "Give me an obstacle course to run." So this is not a new thing. It's, kids have been taking their cues from what they see on the screen for a very long time.
No, that's right. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. As you know, at Hoot Reading, we are all about helping parents raise kids who love to read, who are great readers. Where do books fit into this digital landscape? And are kids still reading? Are they reading books? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's start with just reading and move on to books. The kids are absolutely reading, and they're reading probably more than ever because of the amount of text on the screen in the things that they're doing, in the games that they're playing, in the apps that they're using, in seeking out information. So they're reading more than ever. Books are absolutely critical to the way kids grow up. Still, I'm still a little bit divided about reading on screens, ebooks versus physical books. I I um, I think as long as you don't sort of lard up the ebook with lots of distractions, then they're absolutely the equivalent of physical books as well. And what I have called for a while cuddleware, that whether you're reading on a screen or whether you're reading with a physical book, anything that gets a parent and child cuddling on the couch to read together, or even just to read separately, and the child can turn to the parent and say, "What does this mean?" I think is good. We've seen young adult books have become some of the hottest sellers. They're supporting the book industry right now. So clearly, people are building readers, early on, and those kids are becoming passionate. I would put this in much the same category that I was talking about with screens. That a lot of parents get hung up on, is my child reading the right books? Oh, they should be reading these classics, or they should be reading this, that, and the other. And really, what's going to turn them into an avid reader and a lifelong reader is being free to choose the books that really appeal to their passions, and to discover the books that appeal to those passions. We did some work at Dubbit several years ago now to build kind of an early AI way of recommending the next book to a child, and they would grow a tree literally on the screen. As they tried new books, it would branch out from the one book they'd tried before to the one that's related to it. And kids would begin to see where their interests were, where the branches were most full, where the tree was bending. And that would help them to pick the next book, and would encourage them to become serial readers, basically.
That's so cool. I'd love to see that. Did that ever make it into a product?
It did not, unfortunately. It got to full development, and the company changed its mind about where it was going. So.
Well, that's too bad, because I do think even in my own household, between my two children, one really fell into the very typical books that would appeal to someone her age. So she fell in love with Harry Potter and has not turned her back on reading since. But for my son, that just wasn't really his interest. And so it's been a lot more work for all of us to try and find books that he can really love and feel passionately about.
And I imagine it's even tougher right now. And libraries are closed at the moment, so the access to a wide range of books becomes a lot more difficult. I know, me personally, if I walk into a physical bookstore, or if I open up an online bookseller, I get overwhelmed. There are so many things, and they all look so interesting. And I know that my time is limited. My focus is very limited these days. So it's got to be really tough for a kid too, right now, to have the books that are around them, but have it harder to get access to a wide range of things to choose from.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we're all really maybe having our eyes open to the benefit of a school library and a librarian and the roles that those things play. And so I think that's very true. It's a crazy time.
I think parents will be so much more greatly appreciative of their kids' teachers, their kids' librarians, their kids' physical phys ed teachers or sports coaches once they go back to doing that with other people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll wrap up on the topic of COVID for our last question here. If you have one piece of advice that you could offer to parents about managing or about their children's relationships with screens during this time, what would you say to them?
I'd go back to what I was saying before about sharing time, that what we're seeing is kids are more than anything else missing physical time with their friends. And I actually suspect that when the lockdown ends, media use is going to drop precipitously for a little while kids say, I'm free again. I can go to the playground. I can meet my friends to play basketball. We can play tag. We can jump rope. We can do all these physical things we haven't been able to do on Zoom. And my advice to media makers has been, don't worry about it. They'll come back. Don't take it personally. But for the families now, while they're still on lockdown, you have become your kid's playmate. You've become their schoolmate. And I know this is incredibly difficult for parents. You're trying to do your own work. You're trying to have your own downtime. And kids, particularly in the age group we're talking about, really need a lot of reassurance. They need a lot of support. They need a lot of engagement. They need a playmate. So any way you can find that's fun for both you and your kids to sit down together and read, to sit down together and watch, to sit down and play, do a puzzle. Puzzle sales are through the roof right now. Jigsaw puzzle sales, board game sales, the same thing. So find what works for your family in terms of time, what time of day works best for everybody being in a good mood for it, having the available time to really breathe and relax. My last piece of advice is do breathe, that don't get anxious about the amount of time your kids are spending on certain things, or that give yourself a break. Do not give in to guilt. Give your kids a break, and we'll all work through it.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. And it really does hit home for me, having kids in that kind of, let's say 6 to 9 range, those emerging readers that we work with at Hoot Reading. I think one of the really great things that we've realized as a family since COVID is how much fun we can have consuming media together. Again, I mentioned, that you mentioned the competition shows, and I mentioned one that we've been watching. I think they are in this really nice age where you can find things that you're not sort of like, oh, I'm watching, a baby show. It's like, oh, I'm really into this too. And you're really excited about it. And so I think it's a really unique time, and we can take advantage of that.
I've got a teenager here, and we're spending much more time sitting at dinner. Before somebody had to go off and do homework, and somebody had to go off and do some work, and somebody had late rehearsal or practice or something. We're just spending a lot more time at dinner, and we're trading media. It's like, oh, have you seen this TikTok? Have you seen this YouTube video?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us today on our YouTube channel at Hoot Reading. It's wonderful to have you.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing all the interviews that you'll do.
Thank you.